I wish that I had more faith or confidence in knowing that people could be invested in me as a person. Not knowing that for certain took me away from a lot of opportunities and experiences. The first time that it was clear to me that someone was invested in me as a person, I started to flourish. If there's one thing that I want, you know, that next Black student and really anybody to know is that you have so much value and there are people who are going to be 100% invested in you. Even though they're not showing themselves to you right away, they are out there. And you just have to keep going. You have to trust that you're going to find them.
My name is West Givens, and welcome back to the Tungsten Originals podcast. You just heard part of my conversation with writer, director, and activist Lee White. We discussed his first industry job after graduating from film school, the equality he's fighting for, and how to combat imposter syndrome. I'm so excited to debut the return of the podcast with this episode. Lee is one of the most thoughtful people I know, and I'm very proud of the conversation we had. If you enjoy this episode, please rate and review the podcast on iTunes. It's truly a huge help. And if you do, I'll mail you some tungsten stickers for free. Just get in contact with us on any social media so I can get your info. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy. Episode 59 of the Tungsten Originals podcast. Lee, welcome back.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's actually been. Oh wow, it's really been a long time.
It's been a very long time. Too long, I would say. You've been on the episode, or not the episode, you've been on the podcast 3 times. First time it was just you, and the second time it was you and Paige. So this is I think you're one of the first people to be, I think you're the first person to be on this 3 times, other than like Brooks and Kara, because I did a lot of episodes with them. So welcome. Yeah. It'll be like the SNL like 5-timer club thing.
You get the green jacket.
yeah, exactly. But I'm so glad one, that the podcast is back. It feels good to actually be interviewing people again. I feel like I'm a little rusty. When I was setting up the equipment, I was like having to remind myself like this goes there and all that kind of stuff.
Red to yellow.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm so glad that you're the first episode of this new season, if you can call it that, of the 2021 season, because you're one of my closest friends, and I absolutely love the discussions we have about, our lives, film, all that kind of stuff. So, and a lot has happened in both of our lives since you were last on the podcast, but also just since like we saw each other face to face,
Yeah.
So plenty of things to cover.
I was going to say, I don't know if you're counting the off the block thing,
right?
Or if that's entirely separate.
Yeah, exactly. So either way, it's been a long time.
Been a while.
But for those who don't know you, I want to give you a little introduction. I assume most people listening probably know you in person, but maybe some people, this is their first time hearing from you, and they will, of course, fall in love with you just like the rest of the world has by the end of this episode. So you are a fantastic writer, director, producer, actor. Give them a little rundown. Pitch yourself to the audience, if you will.
Oh God, I mean, things really. Well, let me just say that things for me have kind of changed a little bit, and in terms of how I see myself. More importantly, I guess the things that I would want to add to that list, those are the things that I probably want to be at the forefront, I guess.
Right.
A roundabout way of saying that. I'm a writer, director, producer, actor, as you said, but more importantly, as of late, just been a very staunch human rights advocate, and recently added to the list of these different things that I've added. I'm an author now, published author, Um, and those are probably the two things that I'm probably most excited about. I don't know if I did a
Well,
good job selling myself,
I
but
don't think you really need to. I totally
that's who
agree
I am.
with both of those things. And I'm excited to dive into, you know, both of those topics. I think especially last, I mean, I don't want to, I mean, I know we're going to talk about 2020, but I don't want to sound like those people who are like, man, 2020 was like crazy, because I think that can come off as like ignoring the actual issues that had been boiling forever and that boiled over last year, and just
Sure.
almost saying like, oh, 20, whatever. But I think last year was a large time, at least for me, of like reflecting. And I think maybe a lot of people can come out of that and think about how maybe describing themselves differently in a professional way, or just like in a personal way, like you were just talking about. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought those up, because I think those are incredibly important things.
Yeah.
But backing up a little bit more, one of the biggest things to happen since we last on the podcast is that you have officially graduated from SCAD, double
Yes.
major in film and television production and performing arts,
Mm.
which which not a lot of people have done. So
For good reason, you
right,
know.
right. It's a long journey, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
it's not that it's impossible. It's just that it's
Right.
crazy.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. So how does it feel to be done with film school and acting school, if that's what you would call that?
it feels really good, and I know that every graduate will probably say it feels really good.
Hmm.
It feels really, really good, because it was such a long journey for me.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't have a very traditional, what does that even mean? But I didn't have a very traditional like college experience. And um, just to finally come through that,
Hmm.
it was, that big sigh at the end of like the movie, Um, I had that moment, and it was everything that I thought it would be.
Good.
Um, it wasn't like the moment where you're like, well, now what? Like for me,
Right.
it was like a,
Yeah.
and it felt really, really good. I do miss the structure of it,
Yeah.
um,
Same.
because I loved having the routine. I love routine, and um, that's when I find myself being in the groove of things. But all that stuff you can figure it out later. It's just really good to
Right.
be out.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think one of those things, at least that I would think about a lot when I was still in school, um, it's there's excitement to graduate, but it's the big question of like, well, then what is next? Because in a lot of ways, college is like a safety net. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
it's at a job, if you mess up, you could potentially get fired. But at school, it's like, well, you move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Um, and so I know I was super worried about like, in my mind, I just pictured like walking to a cliff, and I'm like, what else is, like, I've
What
had
are
this
you
structure for
doing?
18 years or whatever. And I know a lot
Mm,
of film people right now, or SCAD film people, I should say, are like probably feeling the same way, especially with graduating with a film degree during a pandemic.
mm.
Is a kind of weird
Well, I
position
would
to be in.
say it's so the thing about it is, um, I saw a post on Instagram, and I hate to like be the guy who like calls up posts from Instagram and like memes and everything, but I saw one, and it said, if in the year 2020, if the year 2020 didn't bring out the hustler in you, then it's just not in you.
Yeah.
And um and I think that's very real, because a lot of us graduated, we finished school, and you have to find a way to motivate yourself. No
Yeah.
one's going to tell you go work on your senior project or
Mm-hmm.
go work on this project with me. Um, you don't have those incentives anymore. And so you have to have that in you already.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly believe if you don't have that kind of motivation, that grit in you already, then it's not in you and you're gonna have to figure some stuff out probably. you
Yeah,
know, it's
100%.
an
I think,
unfortunate thing.
yeah, last year was definitely a huge test on, like, it put a lot of things into perspective. And for me, realigned my priorities in a lot of ways. You know what I
Okay.
mean? In terms of like my relationships with people and how I want to spend my life and that kind of stuff. But one of the reasons that it took so long for me to post podcast episodes, then I really only posted one, that solo episode I did during last year, or like after coronavirus started, was because it was so, like, it was difficult to be motivated, but it also felt as if, um, because of the ongoing conversations about like the Black Lives Matter protests, I was
Mhm.
thinking to myself, who wants to hear what I have to say? Like, I guess I didn't want to like occupy a space that was already being occupied with like really important stuff. And
Mm.
just on top of that, it was hard to be motivated because it felt like the world was crumbling. So I guess the question is, did you at all feel, um like, did your motivation falter at any point or fade? Obviously, it's always been there in some capacity because we're still doing the things we are doing. Um, but how would you like tackle that
Yeah.
if that ever did come up?
Um, yeah, it definitely did. I mean, it's human. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, some days you wake up and you don't feel 100% your best self. That happened quite often, actually. Um, I mean, even actually getting towards the end of my college career, um, I had so many things going on mentally. I was um, struggling with anxiety, and um, I felt like an imposter. And I don't know if you've ever felt that way.
Oh,
Um,
I feel it right now. I feel
I
it every
was gonna
moment
say
of my life.
I feel like everyone that I've talked to, they've
Oh
said
yeah.
something similar. But I just felt like an imposter, and
Hmm.
um, there were a couple of different opportunities coming down the pipe for me, um,
Yeah.
and I just I just felt like I don't deserve this. This could like be something that someone else could like really thrive in, and I felt like there was some sort of responsibility to go find that person and tell them like there's this great opportunity that was given to me, but I don't feel like I can do it, but I think that you can do it. And
Right.
like how exhausting would that have been? um and but
Yeah,
that's
seriously.
that's how your brain's
Yeah.
working, like when you're like panicking and you feel like an imposter and you feel
Hmm.
like these things that are happening around you shouldn't be happening to you. And you start to turn your back on different blessings or opportunities that are coming your way. And
Yeah.
um, I think that it's really, really important um, to have people who can like pull you out of that funk because,
Yeah.
you know, I don't think that any one person is just someone who doesn't want to do anything. They just want to like wake up and go to sleep, wake up, go to sleep. But we run into those spells when that does happen, right? um, and so for me, like it was happening all the time.
Hmm.
I would have all of these cool things happening, but like later on that day I'd be like, oh my god, like I don't deserve
Yeah.
this. And this opportunity is just going to be taken away from me because people are going to realize that I'm not I'm not this person, or I'm not
Hmm.
this thing that they've built up, or maybe that I've built up,
Hmm.
Your thoughts when you're alone can be real dangerous.
Yeah, that's another like crazy part about last year is the isolation aspect of it, and
Mm,
how like you can get into, I mean, I get into the negative thought spirals, like, and then I start talking to someone and it like nearly immediately brings me out of it. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So
yeah,
last year also just highlighted for me the importance to be connected with people. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, I think another thing when it comes to the imposter syndrome thing, um, is you really tend, that inner voice tends to delegitimize all of the cool stuff that you're doing, all of the projects that you're doing,
yeah,
because you're like, you think, oh well, I made this really great thesis film, but like a lot of people have thesis films. How different is mine from the rest of, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Um,
It's like you're in my head.
yeah, this is therapy. It's you can Venmo me, whatever it is.
Mm,
I'm really affordable. Uh,
shoot me your rates.
yeah, I will. But it's good to get validated every now and then about those
Yeah,
projects, both by peers, like friends and family, whenever they say like, hey, this thing is like genuinely good. And I think I can
mm,
personally tell whenever friends are telling me that something is good just because they're friends and want to be nice, versus when they're like, no, seriously, I connected with this thing you made in A, B, and C. But also whenever you're talking to, you were talking about all those different like opportunities that you had. Those are people who like don't know you on a personal level, and they don't really, there's no incentive other than being a good person to like be nice to you and flatter what you're doing. So
yeah,
whenever someone who is like, I guess, higher up in your career, quote unquote, hard quote unquote, um, it's like, oh wow, someone who has more experience than me is like noticing this. That's always a kind of cool thing in my opinion.
yeah.
And I know
It's
you had a lot of that last year.
yeah. Oh my God. Oh my God. Yeah. I I tell you. Okay. So just like a quick rundown of what like last year was like for me.
Okay.
Um, I was really lucky. I had a really good friend. His name's Glenn, and um, he had a job with Google, and he walked away from it.
I,
And
I forgot about this. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
he had a
Sorry,
job with
continue.
Google, and he walked away from it. And his supervisor, Tim, at the time, really needed someone to like just step into it. And they were ideally looking for someone that they really wouldn't have to train,
Hmm.
and pour a lot of money into like training this person, and someone that they could like just like leave.
Hmm.
And um, basically, long story short, like Glenn gets me into this position, right? And so I start working for Google, and I was working for Google uh, through the pandemic,
Hmm.
and um, it was an easy paycheck. Um, the work was easy. I know IT very well, so the work was very easy. I wasn't spending a lot of time or energy on it. But the thing about it was that imposter syndrome like really took over.
Hmm.
And it took over in such a way that I actually, you know, ended up quitting. And when I quit, it was like, now what do I do? You know?
Yeah, exactly. I still need to eat.
It's just like I gotta eat, I gotta. And so I think for a week, for like a solid week, I was completely out of sorts, didn't know what to do. I was going to therapy at that time, still am. And, um, my therapist like was the one who was like, fortunately like helping me like refocus,
Hmm.
and like pay attention to those things that could pull me out of the mud. And I mean, it's important to have those people who can do that for you.
Yeah, 100%. Especially like just especially with all the all the things last year that happened that none of us had ever experienced.
Sure.
You know what I
Sure.
mean? I think it also just another thing is I got better last year at giving myself slack on things.
Mm.
Like when it came to this podcast, you know, my girlfriend and friends can tell you, I was so hard on myself about making it sound like amazing. Like I would spend many hours on the post production process, cutting out every tiniest mistake that not a human would notice, but like I
Oh,
knew it
I
was there.
remember.
Yeah, I
I
think you've.
remember.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, and if it wasn't up at Friday at 9 a.m., I was really hard on myself at that. And then I started getting better. Like, well, it'll go up on the weekend, and then it got to um, the episode with Kate Elizabeth, which was the last episode pre-pandemic, that I started taking a break because my senior classes were crazy. I was helping produce this short called Pink, and then
Mhm.
the world changed forever, and I stopped posting an episode for a little bit. But like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, you'll always be your self's biggest critic, and I think there are good things about that because it means that you are, or at least I am always striving to be better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you don't want to be like your the worst voice ever in your head
Yeah.
because you need to give yourself slack to actually create things and be a person, like be a normal person outside of all that stuff. So I'm glad that you like had that person because I think everybody needs that in some capacity, whether it's
Yeah.
therapist, family, friend, like people you play video games with, like whatever it is. It's good to get out of your own head. You know what I mean?
I, and the great thing is that I found that person in so many other people. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't just my therapist,
Yeah.
it was so many people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it is absolutely wonderful. Sadwith, Professor Sadwith, okay, so I told you about getting towards the end of college
Mm-hmm.
and like feeling like an imposter. I was like, oh my God, like I don't want this. And like I had so many things happening. Um, I my brother, my brother was a big part of, me wanting to finish school and um, that was really, really important to him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to say that it wasn't important to me because it was, but it was really, really important to him. And he passed away. And here it was, I was getting close to the end. And, at the end, big ceremony and like your family's here,
Yeah.
yada, yada,
Yeah.
yada. And so, like, for me, that was like, oh man, like every time I woke up in the morning for an 8 a.m. class, it was all I could think about.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be the first thing on my mind as soon as I log on the Zoom class.
Yeah.
It's the first thing that I
Zoom
think of.
college. Yeah.
Um, and I started to self-sabotage myself. I would write or do the assignments, and I would do it, but the professor would be like, "Okay, where's yours?" And I'd be like, "I don't have it."
Mm-hmm.
And in my head, it made total sense.
As it always
You know,
does.
I'll sabotage myself and I'll give myself another quarter. Um, and in my head, it seemed totally logical. I wasn't worried about it. It was just like, that's just what I'll do. And I'll just come up with some excuse and tell other people, like, oh, I wasn't able to graduate because of whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I had already worked it out, and Professor Sadwith, um, he texted me and was just like, "What is up?" um, he was like, "You have not turned in your assignments for like 3 weeks,"
Yeah.
and
Which is, so people know, nearly half of the quarter it's get.
yeah,
So that's a
uh,
big deal.
And he was like, you haven't turned in for 3 weeks. And fortunately, I've had Professor Sadwith like 4 or 5 times
Yeah.
at this point. And so we're very familiar with one another.
Mm-hmm.
We communicate regularly, and he knows that it's abnormal or just kind of odd. And so we talked, and we we had a Zoom meeting, which was absolutely miserable. I cried the entire I cried the entire meeting. um, I cried the entire meeting, and he, I don't know, he really helped me, um, and so it was around that time. It was getting close to my brother's birthday, which
Mm.
is October 20, and
That's the same month as
I
my brother. Fun fact.
it's well, my brother's birthday is 5 days before my birthday.
Oh, wow.
And so it was just getting close, and it's like my body could sense it, it could feel it. And I was just tanking really, really hard. Um, but Professor Sadwith, honestly, without him, like, and so many other people, my mom and just other family members who I could really talk to, I mean, I would have been dead in the water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
I'm so glad. I mean, Professor Sadwith is like a great professor in the educational sense, but just like he's one of those, like, I think he's like a mentor.
I mean, he's the reason why I have, the job that I have now. I mean, he's just been absolutely completely instrumental for like all these different successes happening in my life.
Yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
So I'm glad you brought up your job because I want to talk about that. This is your first post film school job, which is a big
Well,
deal.
actually, it's my second.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a lot of people don't know about the first one that I had because it was like really short lived, but
What
it's
was
the
the first
second.
one? Now I'm curious,
Um,
if you don't
the
mind.
first one, no, I don't mind. The first one it was like honestly the perfect gig, right out of school. Um, um, the last time that we spoke on like, this kind of was over the summer
Hmm.
for the Off the Block Film Fest.
Right.
And um, it was during like the big momentum of the Black Lives Matter movement. And um, since that summer, I came into the fall quarter just beating this drum. Like,
Hmm.
I want diversity, I want inclusion, I want to shake some shit up.
Hmm.
And I mean, I know I must have drove people crazy. And I, and honestly, like,
Rightfully so.
I mean, like, every class, like, I was on the same soapbox,
Hmm.
beating the same drum, um, because like I wasn't seeing anything change. And
Hmm.
I remember this guy, Jimmy Benedetto, who's a career advisor at SCAD. He comes in and he's like talking to everybody, and then he goes to me. He's like, "Why do you want to be, a filmmaker?" And I just exploded on him.
I wish I could have been there. Oh man.
I exploded on him, and God bless him for taking it. But I exploded on him because you know I was like, look at our class. I was like, how many black people do you see besides me? And, quick answer, none.
Yeah.
And, that was the case for most of my classes. I was either the only black person, or or I was like one of two, you
Yeah.
know? And that's extremely tough, especially when you've been at the school for, 5 years.
Hmm.
Um, because I've never had a black professor. and I've never been in a class with, more than, two Black people at a time in these classes, and they're usually classes of like 20 people or so.
Yeah.
And so that's really, really tough. And I was telling him my big purpose is to find inclusion and to like be that representation that can, like, I don't know, probably show other Black students or Black parents that, oh, that student, he's Black, and like he did this and he did that, and he was, did pretty well for himself and so on. And so that's really what I want. And I, not so calmly told him that. Um, and so that was my whole fall quarter. But at the end of the quarter, I had an opportunity to work on a documentary that was being executive produced by Leonardo DiCaprio, Greg Palast, and David Ambrose. Um, and it was about voter suppression in Georgia.
Oh, the
And
Stacey Abrams one?
yeah.
Oh, that's
Hmm.
amazing.
Yeah. So I worked on that,
Wow.
and um, I was an associate producer and also a camera operator.
Wow.
So I ran all around, Savannah, a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
Macon, and a little bit of Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
just talking to people. And I had an interview with the mayor in Savannah, Van Johnson, and yeah, that that was my first gig, right out. Um,
Did
but
that come
it was
from your
short lived.
conversation with Benedetto, with Jimmy?
No, it didn't. No, it
Okay.
didn't at all. But it was one of those ones that I kind of I was fortunate to stumble upon it because a really, really wonderful friend set me up to have this interview, and then I got it.
Mm-hmm.
So um, that was really incredible,
Mm-hmm.
because that's I've quickly figured out that that's the line of work that I want to be associated with.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, it was like, well, now what do I do?
Right. That's the
Um,
question, is it? Well, now what?
yeah,
Maybe that'll be the title of the episode. Now what?
yeah, now what? um, but I um, I wrote a script and for Professor Sadwith, and it was just a story about my family, and it's probably the most personal thing I've ever written, and without a doubt the best. And
Mm-hmm.
he kept talking about this friend that he had that he wanted me to meet and talk with, um, and so he introduced me to him, and it's Clyde Phillips, who is the architect of Dexter, um,
Little show,
and
little indie show. If you've ever heard of
little show on Showtime.
it.
Um, And I mean, me and Clyde, we hit it off. I mean, actually, he just texted me just now, actually.
Oh, nice. Let's bring them on.
We
No, I'm kidding.
we've got a really great relationship, which surprises me because he, I don't think a lot of people would, you know, even suspect that like I mean, we've got to be the most odd couple that
Okay.
you could imagine,
Right.
Yeah.
So what, like, now I'm glad you brought that up. So, and I know that there's like NDA stuff, so you can't tell us everything, but
Mhm.
can you give a little bit about like what you are doing with him?
Yeah. So I am an executive writing assistant for Clyde Phillips on Dexter. And my job is really just to be a sounding board,
Mm-hmm.
and also, keep him, going.
Mm-hmm.
And by whatever means, that's what I do. I think the coolest part of the job is that, we have opportunities where we're in writing rooms, or we're having different like meetings with like executive producers of the show, or either directors of the show, and we're literally trying to figure out the best way to communicate a story. And truly adore about working with him is that he has such a capacity to tell the correct story, while also being honest and true to the cultures that are being represented in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such an incredible thing. And it's a small thing, but it's one of those things that people don't do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, that was like a really big thing for me. Like when I was mentioning that off the block thing, was that, you know, I wanted people to have more diverse crews, diverse stories. Um, and I mean, it's still not happening.
Yeah.
And, despite all of that, and, you know, having those opportunities where people were like talking to me and saying, like, oh man, that was so brave and yada, 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 it's still not happening.
Yeah.
Um, and so having that on this side, and
Mm-hmm.
then like going with Clyde over here, and he's talking to people from that culture and asking them questions about like the legitimacy of like this scene that he's
Mm-hmm.
wanting to do. And that that I mean, it's a wonderful thing to
Yeah.
be a part of. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it.
That's
I mean,
awesome.
it's a wonderful thing to
Yeah.
really be a part of.
I think. Do you think the moral of that story is that at the end of the day, when it comes to those different things about like making the film industry better, like one of the three pillars of Tungsten is ushering in a more fair and just film industry. So
Mm.
I guess a lesson that I get from that, from your experience of speaking up at Off the Block, which I'll explain what that conversation was after this, but speaking up there, having more people than you know come to you and tell you how great it was, and then not seeing change in that community versus seeing
Mm.
change at your new job, what that makes me think is we just have to do it ourselves. You know
Yeah,
what I
I
mean?
mean, and the crazy thing is that, I mean, this is Hollywood.
Yeah.
And
Quite
so
literally.
this is literally Hollywood,
Yeah.
and they can do whatever they want. It
Right.
doesn't matter. The product is still going to sell,
Mm-hmm.
and that
Yeah.
has been the case since the 40s when they were
Mm-hmm.
making motion pictures. You know, it doesn't matter. But the fact that they're willing to, and that they
Mm-hmm.
want to, and that they're actively seeking things out, like they won't make a move on like a specific thing because Clyde is telling them, I want to make sure I get this right. So before we like move on, I want to talk to every single last person that I can talk to make sure that I am appropriately, you know, representing, these groups of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling a story not through, my eyes, but I'm telling a story that they can like very easily see it through their own eyes. Um, to me, that seems like kind of a juggernaut of a task to like take on, as opposed to something at film school, which is honestly as easy as having a conversation, and and that's it. um and so to not see it come through
Mm-hmm.
in film school was extremely disappointing. Um, I lost out on opportunities because of that. And um, then to turn around and see that my passion for wanting diversity and like, actively seeking it out leads me to this absolutely wonderful position. So
Right.
it's 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 a good feeling, and you feel like change is actually happening.
Yeah.
And for all of those black filmmakers or black students who are at that film school, whatever film school you're at, and you don't feel like you have a voice and that people aren't listening, I would I would hope that you would listen to something like this, like a story like this, and just keep pushing, because there are so many people who are listening, and they're going to find you, especially if you know what you're doing and you're the best person for that job. They're going to find you, and they're going to put you in those positions to succeed. So,
Mm-hmm. I think that really speaks to the whole idea of like speaking things into the universe, if you want to use that
mhm,
term. Like, if you want something, you get it. You make it
yeah,
known. You tell those around you. And so I think that's one of the best examples of that, because then people like who don't know you personally or like closely, I mean, they
mhm,
hear about Lee and they're like, he's the person who is all about X, Y, and Z. You know
yeah,
what I mean? And that indents them into their brain, which is amazing. But I want to
mhm,
I want to circle back to Off the Block and bring people specifically to that moment, because I'm sure there are people that are unfamiliar with what that was.
yeah,
Um, but basically, Off the Block was a film exposition put on by, or I guess I should say is, I don't know if they're going to do anything 2021, but it was a film exposition put on by SCAD students that was all about showcasing other film students' work. You know what I mean? They did the first one in 2019 in a theater on Tybee Island, which is outside of Savannah, where we went to film school. And last year they did it virtually over Zoom and Vimeo because, of course, we couldn't be together. And I hosted it, so they wanted me to be the host, like, introduce the panels and stuff, and lead Q&As with the directors, which I was like super honored about and enjoyed doing, because I love talking to filmmakers. Obviously, that's why we're doing this right now. But yeah, so I think that was in June, like the very beginning of June, I think, is when the
yeah,
actual exposition was. And basically, we had a block. I forget which specific one, but we were talking to filmmakers. And one of the things that we could do, since it was all live over Zoom, is people could ask questions like live on air. They could join the Zoom call, ask a question in person, and then we could discuss it. And so I was, hosting this block. And I think we were talking about, I think the overall topic was like how we as filmmakers can speak truth to the Black Lives Matter movement, because as you pointed out, in the early summer, that was like the conversation happening. And
yeah,
Off the Block, before it started, had announced that they were going to donate all of their proceeds to like three specific organizations that address those things. And then you joined the call and asked a question, and I was so glad that, I think you're the perfect person to bring this up, because you're so honest, and that's one of my favorite things about you, and genuine, and like address topics head on, which I think is what we need. But do you want to give like a little rundown of specifically what you brought up, and then
well,
the aftermath? Because I know that was kind of a crazy, that was kind of a crazy couple of days.
yeah, um, yeah.
Also, I hope I explained that well.
No, I honestly, I'm glad that you did, because I realized that I've been like recalling it.
You're good.
But
It's because we both know what it is. So
yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, the Off the Block Film Fest, it was supposed to be, this festival that wanted to support Black Lives Matter. And the whole point of Black Lives Matter is to uplift the voices of Black people. And um, the first day of the festival, I looked at all the films and I was familiar with all of them except maybe one.
yeah,
Um,
it was mostly fellow SCAD people.
yeah, I was familiar with them all, and and even with the people in those crews. And
Mm-hmm.
I sat through the whole day and I watched all the films and I watched all the panels, and there wasn't a single Black person um, on any of those panels. And well, I mean, there wasn't a Black person on any of the panels throughout the entire festival. Um, but there weren't any Black writers really. I think there was maybe one for Oasis of the Mind that I can think of just off the top of my head, which is Aaron Grudadoria's film. Um, and it was just this festival that was supposed to highlight Black voices, which would have been excellent to like talk to some of, or if any, of the Black people who contributed to those films. But in most cases, like they were either an all-white crew, cast included, um, or there was only like one Black person on the crew, which I can attest like was me for like most of them.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I just went on there and I was just I wanted to know what they were going to do moving forward in terms of actually seeking out having a more diverse cast and crew,
Mm-hmm.
because I can name off the top of my head, I can name 10 Black SCAD students who graduated from SCAD with maybe like one or two things on their reel,
Mm-hmm.
which is hard, because the reel is what the reel is like your resume. You
Mm-hmm.
know, if you were a production designer and someone only gave you one chance throughout your entire SCAD career, I mean, that's you only get chances to show that one thing to whoever you're hoping will hire you. And that's like going into a job interview with only one reference,
Yeah.
you know? There's only one person in the world that you can call to like tell you that
Yeah.
I'm a good worker. And it's like that's just not enough. And often you will not get the job. Um, and so that's the case. And I want that to change. And um, I mean that ruffled the feathers in a good and bad way. Um, and yeah, I mean, people were really excited because they wanted an opportunity, I guess, to show that they could like be more diverse and things like that. But I mean, for the most part, I mean, the issues still persist. Like I see Indiegogos going up all the time with films that are just white cast and crews, and you know, it's just kind of sad that it's still not changing. Um,
Yeah.
so
Especially considering the overwhelming support that you got from that. I mean, it was like a
yeah,
3 day event. The first 2 days were student blocks, and the last day was a feature. Um, but you got like, I remember you telling me that you got a ton of calls, like a lot of people DM'd you on Instagram, like so many
Yeah.
people, were rolling
A
out the
lot
red
of people.
carpet, which is good,
It was
like that's,
nice. It was
yeah,
wonderful, but
exactly.
at the end of the day, it's like I'm not looking for any like praise or adoration.
Yeah.
I'm looking for action. And I personally haven't seen it yet.
hmm And I think something that I brought up during those panels is that you hear whenever we talk about these like human rights issues that are persisting these days, you hear people say like, why is nobody talking about this? We should be talking about this. And
Mhm.
I think this is to your point. The discussion, the conversation is an important part. It's important to sit down and talk to people who agree with you, think differently, have different points of view, and think about how you can make the world better. But then you actually have to go and act. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You can't have like, I guess what I'm trying to say is you can't have one without the other. It's
exactly.
it's it's kind of hard to just go out and start doing things when you haven't talked to people who have different viewpoints or different backgrounds, because you need to hear their voice. But then just talking is great, and you can change minds, I guess, whenever it comes to like one-on-one conversations. But the the issue you're bringing up is not why is nobody talking about having a black crew. It was why doesn't anybody
Yeah.
have a black crew? You know what I mean?
And
So
I don't want
going
to
in,
make it seem, sorry,
no, no, go ahead.
I don't want to make it seem like, for anyone listening, I don't want to make it seem like it's your job, you know? Um, but like you said, there are steps that each and every one of us can take. Um, and changes are going to happen, you know, in a vacuum.
Yeah,
Um, so you have to you have to keep doing it. You can't just, one time was enough. It's not that sort of thing. You have to keep doing it. You have to keep encouraging people to do it. And if people see your dedication to it, that can be something that's infectious, you know. And I mean, if we don't do it, then nothing's going to change. So
right.
um, we just have to.
Yeah, 100%. Um, Something that I wanted to bring up in terms of like how you were talking at the top of the episode about how you would change how you would describe yourself, and one of those would be an activist. I
Mm,
want to talk about one of the things that you have done that directly aligns with that, which is like one of my favorite things that you've done, and it's your book, A Crown of Feathers.
mm,
And we received a couple of people asking about it because it is a, universally adored, at least from from the people that I talk to. It's such a cool thing. Can
yeah.
you tell the audience, for those who don't know, a little bit about what A Crown of Feathers is and how it came to be?
Yeah. Well, like I said earlier, I have been going to therapy, and my therapist is a grief specialist.
Okay.
And before my brother passed, he paid for this grief specialist for me for 3 years, and um, so I had been going to him for a while, and it started off as trying to communicate with people that I potentially have wronged or wasn't um, totally upfront with, or not being my truest self around them, that sort of thing. Um, but you get the idea. And it was just trying to have a moment of honesty or vulnerability with them, which is something that I have struggled with, and just trying to talk them through what I've been going through and why it may have been difficult at that time, to communicate or to be my truest self around them. And in many cases, it was, relationships that might have been, lost because of, an unwillingness on my part to either change or, open up or, reciprocate different things in the relationship. So I started writing these letters. But a thing about me is that anything that I write is going to be very flowery. Um, that's just how it is. um, I can't help it.
Yeah.
Um, and so I started writing it, and um, I let my therapist read some of it, and it made a comment. Um, Saying that it felt very, very poetic, specifically one that I was writing to an ex of mine at the time. And um, I said that it sounded and it seemed very poetic. And I that's when the idea kind of hit me. I was like, maybe I could, I don't know, write all of these just like with the intention of it being a poem
Mm.
and um, collect them all together. And I think the next day I was like, I could make it a book. And it's so crazy when I think about this timeline. So this is a timeline. I quit Google, and then next week I started writing a book.
I didn't know it was that
And
quick.
yeah, and next week I started
Wow.
writing a book, and I finished it over the summer.
Hmm.
Um, and before I knew it, I had maybe around 380 so poems that I had written. And we got connected with this publisher in New York. Um, and he suggested that we cut some out, or that I cut some out. And of course, I was like, no, you're killing my babies and all that stuff. But I saw his point, and I ended up cutting them out. And in my head, I really wanted to like add something else to it. And so I ended up reaching out to two of my friends, Luca and Kevin, to collaborate with me on it, providing some artwork and illustrations for the book. And then, boom,
Here we
no
are.
feathers.
It's so Kevin Betu is an artist and illustrator. He's one of like the earliest episodes of our
Oh my gosh.
podcast.
He is.
Simply the best.
Can I just talk about Kevin? Um,
Absolutely.
First thing I want to say is he and I recently played Super Smash Brothers together, and he talked a lot of trash. And you can talk to him about those results. But
Okay. We'll
um,
do a follow-up interview.
yeah, yeah. Ask him how it went. But Kevin was absolutely wonderful. He he took those poems, and the thing that I loved the most about it was that he and Luca both they both took so much ownership of the poems, and really really catered to the levity and the honesty that was in the book. And they came up with these wonderful illustrations and drawings that are scattered throughout the book. Um, and I don't know, I remember when Kevin gave me the first illustration, I cried for the whole day, I think. Because I think he tried, I think it might have been the time when he tried to call me and talk about it, and I couldn't even talk to him about it because
All right.
I was I was just crying because, you know, he had like captured the feelings that I had for so long. Um, and in that way, like also sort of validating me. And it just was a wonderful thing. I owe him a lot.
Yeah. They're really, I mean, he is like just so talented in like all of the work he does.
Oh, yeah.
Um, you know, so this isn't to discredit his other stuff, but like the Crown of Feathers stuff is just like it's so cool to go back to the stuff that he was making whenever I first interviewed him, which was like
Hmm.
early 2019, you know, and then to see that work, and it's just like he is.
Amazing.
It's so cool to see an artist grow and have their work be displayed in that fashion. It's so amazing. Well, if you're listening to the audio version of this, we have a video version on our YouTube channel. So we'll throw up some of the illustrations that we're talking about, and you can see it. But also, one of the like coolest things is where the money is going to. So
Yeah.
talk about that and how much money you've raised,
Yes.
which is a very significant amount.
Yeah, it is. We, I think the biggest thing, because I had a conversation with Kevin about it. It was over the summer. And again, kind of like the thing that it's kind of like really the defining moment was this Black Lives Matter movement that was happening. Um, as that was taking place, it seemed as if there were an even bigger struggle happening within the Black community itself, which was um, Black people picking and choosing who gets a chance to fight this fight
Mm.
for racial equality, true racial equality. Um, there were specifically a moment that really wounded me. Honestly, was it was a mob of 30 or so men at a gas station who attacked this woman, this Black woman, because she, had transitioned from, you know, man to woman, and they attacked her because of that. And it just seemed like the Black trans community, um, they were they were strong advocates for the Black Lives Matter movement, but it just seemed like it just seemed like some parts of the community were picking and choosing who gets a chance to fight this fight. And it's like this is their fight as well. This is
Mm-hmm.
all of our fight,
Right.
And um, I just felt like, I talked with Kevin. We just kind of felt like um, the spotlight was not, you know, the right size. Or it was only focused on like one specific facet, and it needed to be much brighter.
Mm-hmm.
And so we chose to donate the proceeds for the book to Black Trans Lives, um, specifically. And I mean, I got to be honest, I did not. I wrote this book with the intention of people getting to know me a little bit better, because like I said, with the several people in my life who I wasn't exactly, the most open and honest with, you know, I wasn't exactly open and honest with a lot of the friends that I had made over the years. There were still things about me that I didn't share.
Mm-hmm.
And so I made that book as an opportunity for, you know, people to see me and
Mm-hmm.
see like what sort of things I had gone through, why maybe I am the way I am. um, and Um, I honest to God, I thought maybe like 50 people might buy it, and we could have a nice conversation about it,
Hmm.
whatever. Um, we have raised 75,000 plus dollars for Black Trans Lives, which is incredible. Um, and the response to that book has been pretty. I mean, it's jaw dropping. I have my phone here. I'm gonna show you a picture
Okay.
that I took. I visited Clyde's place here um, because he needed some help with some things. And so I went over to his place, and he's got like his little nook over here. And I was walking by it, and then I like something caught my eye. And so I stopped and I was like, what? And I'm going to put this up here.
Yeah, you can text it
Um,
to me too, and I can put it up. But yeah, we can see it pretty
but
well too.
this, wait, that is my book
Yeah.
on his nook. And so,
That's your book on
I
his
mean,
nook.
that was that was just a
That's a
unbelievable
that's a
thing.
moment, you know?
And he told me, he's like, hey, you need to sign my book because I'm going to sell this on eBay. But I mean he bought my book. He's read it. He says that he continues to read it.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean he's told literally the entire crew here at Dexter about the book. So,
Wow.
only a matter of time for that conversation like starts happening. But I mean, it's truly incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
people are still purchasing it,
Hmm.
and um, it's incredible. I, I just never saw that happening. Um,
Yeah.
so it's been a really cool thing. I signed a contract, um, and I have one more book on the deal,
Oh, what?
which I've
Whoa! I didn't know.
started.
I didn't know the level of like your association with the publisher. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was for two books. Crown of Feathers, satisfies one, and the next one is Boys Don't Cry, and um, that'll probably be coming out like next year or maybe this year, depending on how fast I crank it out.
Yeah. Exactly.
Um, but I think I'll probably take some time and just you know let let a Crown of Feathers be
Yeah.
its own thing for a while.
Hmm.
But um, I've already started writing the second one, and probably 50 or so poems
Wow.
slash short stories in.
That's amazing. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm so excited to see it. We
yeah.
have a submitted question from one of our
Oh,
lovely audience members, Carly
cool.
Sullivan, friend of the show, been on the podcast before. She asked, "What's your favorite? What was your favorite part about creating the book?"
My favorite part about creating the book was um, I had never really talked about. I was writing about my brother. Um, I never talked about him with anyone,
Hmm.
and um, that always just felt like way too personal, and no one will ever get an opportunity to see that side of me. And it was that was the second to last one that I wrote. Um, the very last one that I wrote was one of the quotes that he said to me, which was, "It's never too late to be a gentleman." And um, I started writing about him, and it's it's a hard story to think about and talk about, but I was just I just started writing,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just pouring out of me. And um, I think once I put that last word down, um, it just all just kind of hit me.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't put any periods in the book because I didn't want. To me, a period suggests that's the end, and there's not another opportunity for that sentence or that idea to grow any further. Like that is the
Mm-hmm.
end. And so I didn't want to put a period throughout the entire book. And I made that decision when I was writing that story, which was the last one. Um, and I just didn't want that story to be over. And I didn't want that thought, that feeling to ever stop. So um, I just kind of took the lead from writing that story to like go back into all the others and like remove every single last period that was there. Because I don't know, writing about him specifically, um, it felt like it kind of like woke me up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I needed that. That was probably my favorite part about writing that entire book.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Um, what is the specific like organization or organizations that the um, funds are going to?
There's a Black Trans Lives Matter group. They are
Okay,
still
I didn't
work.
know if that was like the actual name of like the organization. Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
gotcha.
yeah.
I knew
There's
that
a
was like
specific
the
group.
issue, but
Yeah, yeah.
gotcha. Very very cool. Um, let's see. I think I had another question. Um, Haley French asked, "How do you find the time slash inspiration to write when you're busy?" And I wanted to add on to that question. How do you find the time to write when things seem really bad? And I guess I mean in terms of like last year, or really, it seems like the news cycle always, especially we're recording this on January 9th. This week was a pretty terrible week in terms of what happened at the Capitol and
Yeah,
everything. But
absolutely.
um, so I guess I passed the question off to you.
Um, I and this is, fear of sounding like an asshole. um,
That's everything I say.
I it's funny. I talked to Clyde, who is now a mentor of mine. Um, he goes for a run every morning, right? And when he goes on a run, this is going to sound crazy, but he takes pen and paper with him when he runs.
Oh, huh.
And regardless of whether the idea is great or brilliant, there's always some sort of idea that's going to be coming at you, and you can work with it or not work with it. But the idea is getting into the habit of always writing and always writing something down. And it's a hard practice for sure,
Yeah.
because sometimes when I remember when I started trying to practice that, and it just everything turned into doodles.
Totally. Right. Right.
um, but I think the interest of being totally honest and vulnerable, that just like opens up so many different stories that you want to tell. Um, like for instance, for me, um, This just from the summer till now, or from the summer until November, I had written a book, uh, four different scripts, one of them being a feature, and um, I think it's just once you start telling stories that are so deeply personal, you start finding other little stories in those little moments or things that you're telling or you're talking about, you know. And whether you're writing just a paragraph thing or a full blown script or something,
Yeah.
um, just just do it. Um, and I know that that is easier said than done,
Right.
but
Yeah.
you honestly just have to do it because, like we said earlier, I mean, like finding that motivation is going to be like so difficult. Um, and I don't know, you have to find new ways to push yourself,
Mm-hmm.
um, which I'm finding new ways to push myself every day and keep writing and keep doing something. Um,
Mm-hmm.
a big help is reading.
Right.
Read as much as you can because I mean you're gonna be able to pull so much from that.
Mm-hmm. So uh we're getting near the end, and there's a couple questions that I'd like to end on. Um
Mhm.
and the first one, I think, encapsulates a lot of what we've talked about this episode. But, you just finished college.
Mhm.
It was a 5-year experience. A lot, not that I need to remind you. It was a 5-year experience, a long and winding road, you
Yeah,
know, and now you are working professionally in the industry. Um, there might be someone, let's say that there's someone listening right now who just started as a freshman at film school, whatever film
mm,
school it is, and they, let's say they're a black filmmaker or just a person of color filmmaker in general, and they, like you, don't see around them what they want to see in terms of the representation on crew and cast and just the stories in general. And they're feeling hopeless. And of course, as a freshman, like you feel you're probably going to be a PA on all the stuff that you start off with. So you feel like there's no way you feel like your voice is maybe of less importance, maybe, which is not true,
yeah.
but you feel that way. If you could say one thing to that person, what would it be?
I wish that I would have had people um, who would have been truly, I guess, invested, or I wish I would have known that people could be truly invested in me and not just whatever story I was telling. Um, there was always one thing that I had, which was like confidence in my ability, whether it be working on cameras or whatever. I always
Mm-hmm.
had confidence in my ability, because a lot of it was just really technique. And, as long as you did it right, you did it right. And that was it. Um, but I wish that I had more faith or confidence in knowing that people could be invested in me as a person. And not knowing that for certain kind of took me away from a lot of opportunities and experiences. Um, but the first time that it was clear to me that someone was invested in me as a person, I started to flourish. Um, and so, if there's one thing that I want, you know, that next Black student, and really anybody, um, to know, is that you have so much value, and there are people who are going to be 100% invested in you. And even though they're not showing themselves to you right away, they are out there. And um, you just have to keep going. You have to trust that you're going to find them,
Mm-hmm.
or that they will find you.
Right. I think that's fantastic. Um, I think your whole story about how you started and where you are now totally speaks truth to that. So I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
The final question is actually from another audience submitted one from Kara Ang, friend of the show, been on this podcast many, many times. Um, she asks, what are you most excited about for 2021? Now, again, like I said, we're filming this uh, January 9th. So we're still in like New Year time. When this comes out, it'll be February, but it's we've got a blank slate, quote unquote, ahead of us. So what are you most looking forward to?
Um, I think the thing that I'm most looking forward to is um, it's crazy because I'm already doing it. Um, I I have been literally shoulder to shoulder with all sorts of people in this industry. I've been on Zoom calls with HBO executives, talking to them and learning from all of these studio executives and executive producers for like TV shows and things like that. And um, it just feel it just feels like the best is yet to come already. Um, so I mean like I that's a tough one because like I feel like I'm already doing it, you know.
Right.
I
That's like what you want, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's and it's absolutely wonderful. I know it's over, but I do want to tell you this. And I don't know if anybody listens to or if anybody is like in tune with like universe or spiritual stuff like that. And I'm not really big on all of that necessarily. But there are little things that like totally catch me sometimes. Um, I remember I told you that my brother's birthday is October 20th, right? Um, and so I was talking to my mom maybe a month ago, and um, I was talking to her and I was talking to her about Clyde and everything, and I told her, I was like, "You're never gonna believe this, but guess what day Clyde's birthday is?" And she guessed everybody in my family. And she guessed everybody but the one person that I needed her to guess. She guessed everybody and was wrong. And she was like, "Well, whose birthday is it?" I was like Clyde has the same birthday as Tori. And she was like,
Whoa.
"Oh my God, wow." And then I said, "You're never gonna believe this, but guess when Professor Sadler's birthday is?" And she did it again. She guessed everybody, but the person that I needed her to guess, you know. And so she's like, "Well, who's like, when's his birthday?" And I was like, "His is the same as Tori's as well." Like, and
Whoa.
then she hit me with this. She says, "How interesting is it that the people who have been like really helping you out this year share the same birthday as your brother?" And it's like, whoa, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and so, I mean, take that for what it is, you know.
Mm.
But I do feel like the most exciting thing is like happening to me now. Um, and we're just gonna see what happens next. You know, keep going.
That is As someone who, and I know all our friends do, but as someone who only wants the best for you and wants to see you absolutely thriving, that is like the number one thing I want to hear. So
Thank you.
I'm so happy for you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sitting down and doing this. I could not think of a more perfect person to start off, quote unquote, season 2 of the new and improved podcast, I guess you could say. It is always a pleasure to talk to you, whether it's being recorded or not. And I think that people will really appreciate your honesty. And that's, I mean, on a person to person, as friends thing, that is like one of my most favorite things about you, is that we just have such honest conversations, and sometimes they're difficult and sometimes they're not, but they're always long, which I also like. But I just think people will be able to really connect with what you've said today. So I'm so glad, and I hope this episode goes out to the people who need to hear it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So
me too.
Thank you again. You're welcome anytime, of course. I look forward to making more things together. Hopefully blueberries this year. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready.
But love you very much. Thank you for coming on.
Love you too, man.
And yeah, I look forward to the next episode where you tell us all the even more exciting things you're doing.
Yeah, man. Definitely. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. The next episode will be back out in 1 week, and we'll see you in the next one.